Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the Tempotec Sonata HD2. The HD2 is actually the follow-on to this guy, which is the Tempotec Sonata HD. This one came out a couple of years ago, and it's actually a fine device. It never really worked out for me, but there's tons of positive reviews on it, so it obviously worked for someone. For me, I went to the Tempotec Sonata HD Pro, and it solved all the issues that I had with the original Sonata, plus it sounds a little better. So I kind of stick with the HD Pro. But so today we have the Tempotec Sonata HD2, which again fixes all the problems that I had with the original HD. This is the HD2, and if you look on the Tempotec store today, it's about $29. There's a $2 sale price right now, but generally it's about $29. And the thing that you really want to notice on this page and what makes the Sonata 2 different than the original Sonata, or HD and HD2, is this ES9270 chip. So that is a new DAC that Tempotec is using on the Sonata HD2, quite different than the original Sonata. So we'll get into that in a second, but I do want to thank Tempotec for sending this one out to me. So as I said, this new Tempotec Sonata HD2 is actually using an ESS chip as opposed to a Cirrus Logic chip, and it is the ES9270. And if you look here in the fine print, which you may not be able to see, it's actually a derivative of the quad DAC architecture, the Sabre architecture that ESS has patented and is well known for. So I also use LG phones. I have a V30 and a G8X. These also use ESS quad DACs. Very nice quad DACs for a phone, and LG will be kind of sadly missed for getting rid of that architecture and their whole mobile division. But so it's kind of hard to figure out how much of a derivative this new 9270 is from the original quad DAC architecture, but I'm sure it shares some features. And I will kind of say, kind of right off the bat, it sounds similar. It certainly doesn't outperform my G8X phone, but you know, as far as a general feel for the sound of it, not all that far away from my phone. So let's get into it and say we'll go pros and cons on this one. And like I said, this one I started out with a Tempotec Sonata HD, never really worked all that well. So the Sonata 2, which is this guy, I'll give you kind of a closer look at it. Not too much to look at. It just says Sonata HD. It's got a high-res sticker that you can put on there, and non-removable cord connecting the USB-C to the 3.5 millimeter jack. It comes in this fancy metal case, and so quite nice. But generally, this one just works. The original had this wacky 3 firmware versions, depending on if you were only playing music or calls or some mixture of both. You had to pick which firmware you were using. And I've tried the firmware. It didn't really help the problem. But so finally, with this guy, we have one that you just plug in and it actually works for me as well in USB Audio Player Pro and standalone apps like Spotify, Tidal, Qobuz. These are I use all of those in general. So again, on the HD2, you now have power bumped up to 70 milliwatts from 60 milliwatts, which is a little bit of a bump, which is kind of nice. And as I mentioned, the DAC is now an ESS 9270. The old one was a Cirrus Logic CS42 L42. And now this one handles 32-bit, 384 kilohertz, and DSD. I didn't really test those out, but I went as high as Tidal and Qobuz would go, which those all kind of worked out fine. So, like I said, sound quality is actually surprisingly good for the price. The question is, and this becomes a difficult question, is it actually better than your phone? And there isn't really a clean answer to that. I mean, I have an LG phone. It's not better than my LG phone. Do I like it better than my Samsung phone? Yeah, I kind of do. But for me, I go for a consistent sound. So no matter whether I have a Samsung, LG, or a Pixel phone, I tend to use dongles because it's the same sound across all devices, and I don't have to worry about whether this particular DAC is better than the one that's in that phone. I'd rather have a consistent sound across all my devices, no matter what they have. And that's just kind of a unique situation for me. For you, there isn't a clean answer. It's going to be better. It's an ESS DAC. It's got a kind of a tradition of great sound quality. So is it better than every phone out there? Probably not. But is it better than most phones? Yeah, probably. And I will say that it really shines with higher res sources. So if you're just using YouTube or podcasts or Spotify, all these that just do MP3 quality sounds, it's not going to sound a whole lot different than what your phone DAC sounds like. If you throw a higher res sound out, like Qobuz's lossless streaming, and it sounds really, really good. Even Tidal MQA, which people seem to hate. But when you get the very high res MQA files, there's clearly a difference there. And they do sound really, really good on the 9270. So I will say that if you're kind of on the fence with it and you don't have a source that's really more than MP3 quality, either stick with a budget DAC or try to figure out how to come up with a better source if that's kind of a direction you want to go to. But, I think that's almost the line for me, is that you really need a higher quality source to really hear the difference of an external DAC versus the one that's in your phone, or at least it pops out more and it shines more in that respect. And do pair it with similar budget IEMs. This happens to be a great budget set right here. This is the TRN MT1. This is that KZ 8-core cable. It's kind of a recent release. It's actually a super nice cable, but it only comes in QDC and it only comes in 3.5 millimeter, which coincidentally works really great with a set like this. So you're looking at a $30 DAC, external USB DAC. That's a $15 cable, and that's a $9 set of earbuds, which actually sound really, really good on this set because everything is sort of matched around the same performance characteristics. The MT1 is actually really, really good, and you pair it with a higher quality source and this external DAC, and you actually get a very high quality budget system going on here. But if you only have one piece of that, then try to think about those other pieces as well. So do pair it with something in the same price range-ish. I wouldn't go too expensive. It is an entry-level DAC after all. Despite how much it sounds great, Tempotec does have the E35, it does have the HD Pro for you guys who have more expensive IEMs than the $10 MT1. So on the con side, it's a little bit more laid back than the E35, which was a little more details forward, a little sharper, and it was actually closer to the Cirrus Logic. This is the Cirrus Logic 46L06. For those of you who have an Apple dongle, you'll recognize that number, or not recognize that number. We'll just say it's closer to the Apple dongle than the E35. And the second thing, in this form factor, as opposed to this one where the heat was centralized here, the heat's now right here, right next to your USB port. So do think about that this little guy, after playing music for a while, is going to get a little warm, and that is closer to your USB port. So do make sure that has a little air to breathe or take a break, but you don't necessarily want to put that much heat on your USB port. And as I said, it will underperform more detailed IEMs, more expensive IEMs. So keep them all in the same ballpark. If you've got budget IEMs and an entry-level DAC, that's kind of a good combo. Anything, even more expensive than budget might, you want to think about a dual DAC or something external like a ES100 or Q-Deluxe Q5K. Tempotec has plenty of upper range USB DACs as well, so I would keep the budgets to the budgets, and the more expensive things look elsewhere in the Tempotec family. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.